Hello, I'm Almeta Cooper, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a discussion about a house is not a home, how climate and health affect you where you live. And if you'll notice in my title slide here, that chair there might evoke for you the song that was made popular by Luther Vandross that a house is not a home, a chair is just a chair, because one of the most important aspects about how climate and health are related is that we're talking about real people. We're talking about people who live in homes, not just statistics, not just data. And that's going to be a recurring theme of my comments as I talk with you today. Let's get this out of the way. I have no conflicts of interest. I have no current or potential conflicts of interest to disclose, and I am not receiving any industry funding or support. I'm the National Manager for Health Justice with Moms Clean Air Force. We are a nationwide organization, not for profit, of about 1.6 million moms, dads, and caregivers. And what we are focused on is the protection of clean health, clean air, and children's health. In Maryland, there are about 24,000 members of our organization. What we really focus on is providing reliable information, solutions, and actions for moms, dads, and their families so that they can respond to the very serious issues that we are facing as it relates to the future and as it relates to the protection of clean air. So, what I have begun doing when I talk with audiences is to help people remember the real message of my conversation by giving them to them both at the beginning and the end. So, what I want you in the audience to do is to know that there are three things I want you to take away from this discussion. One, I hope you will be better informed because being informed about these issues is really your best defense. And there's a lot of research that shows it's been done by the Yale Climate Communication Center and the George Mason University Climate Communication Center that there is not a dramatic difference, regardless of age, of party, as to whether or not people accept that there is global warming, that there is climate change. What the real issue is that people do not talk about it. And so, what I want you to do is to speak up, talk to your friends and neighbors and family. And then, last but not least, it's really important to take action. And I'm going to tell you some ways that you can take action. Right now, you can sign a petition, you can support legislation. You can attend a mom's event or another climate event. You can support Moms Clean Air Force or another climate organization, and you can support them by making a donation. So there are things that you can do right now. You do not have to feel helpless. So, what are kind of the themes that are going to go through our conversation today? I'm going to be focused on how climate and health affect you where you live. And it's complex. If it was simple, we would have solved it already. It's not simple. And there's some questions on the screen that will be recurring themes. What is the social context of how these questions arise? What is the political context? What is the legacy of redlining? What are the facts that affect climate and health? What are some of the health risks? And of course, what can you do right now? And then at the end of my presentation, we will be entertaining some questions. So to get started, there's kind of a truism at the bottom of this slide. Where people live has a major impact on their health and well-being. There's lots of research that supports that, even if you didn't know it intuitively. And you see this lovely neighborhood on your screen with plenty of trees, green lawns, lots of space. And that's kind of the idealized version of what a neighborhood looks like. There's some other things that happen in a neighborhood, and because this is primarily a Maryland audience, I thought you'd be interested in this picture, which is from Baltimore's Curtis Bay neighborhood. And if you look to the extreme side of the picture, you see those mountains of coal uncovered, exposed to the air with bulldozers behind them. You see the large facility, and then you see this lovely neighborhood where people probably think that they are living, their best lives, but adjacent to a heavy polluter. So, this particular neighborhood, which is, I think, consistent with what we'll be talking about, is a working class neighborhood, has about equal numbers of blacks and whites, and then it has another certain proportion of people of other ethnic origins. But here's what has been found, and what the neighbors have protested about is that particulate matter, commonly known as soot pollution or PM 2.5, and black carbon are worse when both those bulldozers that you see and the are active and the wind is blowing from the coal terminal. And what happens? How is that related to health? It's not just obnoxious, it's also dangerous to your health. It relates to increased risk for respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, neurological, and reproductive diseases. So let's now look at another kind of part of Maryland history, but not just Maryland history, really across the country, uh, redlining. Redlining, and if you look at this old historical map from the Homeowners Loan Corporation from 1937, you can see what an actual redlining map looked like. And very simply, what redlining was it was a practice begun in the 1930s of using government maps that outlined areas where blacks lived, and these areas were deemed risky investments, resulting in denial of and restriction of mortgages for blacks. Now, it is said that the first instance where this really occurred was that a black man wanted to move to a neighborhood in Baltimore in the early 1900s, and the neighborhood did not want to have that gentleman join them in their neighborhood, and they created this ordinance that didn't actually, have the blatant, outright words that we're going to exclude you on the basis of race, but they used this other more subtle way. And interestingly, this practice spread across the country. The term redlining didn't actually emerge until I think in the 50s or 60s, but this is a part of the history of redlining that is associated with Baltimore. So let's talk about, and I mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation that there are some social factors that health and climate injustice are not simple matters. And what researchers and what communities know is that there are some social determinants, social impacts, social factors that influence what one's health is going to be like. And what you see on this graphic are a number of different factors: education and access, and the quality of that education, healthcare and access, and the quality of healthcare, economic stability, social and community context, neighborhood, and built environment. All of these factors, and there's lots of research, and if you have a great interest in this, you can read to your heart's content to find out that these external factors help determine how climate and health are going to impact you. And what we know is that if you are Black, brown, or live in an under-resourced community, the impacts are going to be greater. Um, in 2020, my colleague, former colleague actually, Daniel Dawes, expanded on the social determinants of health and wrote a book focused on the political determinants of health. And if you think back to redlining, that's a clear example of how the government created a situation that resulted in people being limited on where they could live. We're going to talk about what happens in those neighborhoods and how more of the unhealthy factors impact people in such neighborhoods. But again, we could talk for hours on just this topic, but here's the information that you need if you want to read more about it. But know that there are both social and political determinants of health. And in this conversation, we sometimes tend to have a terminology and jargon that we sort of assume everyone knows what we're talking about. And what most people fail to realize is that a lot of the terms that we use are actually relatively new. So, health justice really did not come into common usage until 2015 when Professor Emily Benfer first advanced the concept of health justice, which is very similar, I think, to environmental justice, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But if you see on your screen, what health justice is a jurisprudential and legislative framework for the achievement and delivery of health equity. And health equity is the access of any person to have the health care they need when they need it and what they need. Environmental justice. Um, Robert Bullard, Dr. Robert Bullard is known as the father of environmental justice. He's from Houston, Texas. And he is the person who's attributed with coining this phrase, which has become widely used. Here in Maryland, environmental justice under Maryland state law means equal protection from environmental and public hazards for all people, regardless of their race, income, culture, and social status. And while we're, explaining terminology, I just want to also take you back to the fundamentals of what we're talking about and remind the audience that climate change returns to long-term changes in the weather, in temperature, precipitation, and associated weather patterns. So, and what we know is that human activities have had a huge influence and impact on climate change, primarily through fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. So again, lots of information out there on climate change, but for our conversation, I just want you to bear this and keep this definition in mind. Now let's look at some facts. And the facts are sometimes a little overwhelming, but the facts that you see on your screen, I've taken these from a report that was published just last month in February of 2026 by Kathleen Kelly, Jill Rosenthal, and Jason Smith, researchers at the Center for American Progress. They published a report how the Trump administration's embrace of oil, gas, and chemical industry interests will endanger children's health. And these researchers reported on these facts. So the staggering number of almost 35 million children under the age of 18 in the United States face health risks due to living in places with failing grades for air quality. And when one references failing grades for air quality, that is typically a reference to the American Lung Association's annual report, The State of the Air. I'm going to talk about that more in a few moments, but know that whenever you hear someone talking about grades for air quality, typically they are talking about the State of the Air report. Also, children under the age of 18 living within 3 miles of an industrial polluter, there's about 2 million of such children. And then about 16,000 children are affected by premature births, which is directly related to air pollution. And for those in the audience who are really focused on the dollars, $5 billion is associated with healthcare and lost productivity costs of premature births linked to air pollution. So these figures show that there is real damage occurring, both to health and economically. So whichever way you want to look at it, you can see that it's not just people kind of pie in the sky like, oh, it's a problem. It's definitely been researched and proved that it's a significant issue. Um, in this slide, which is also referring to that report from Kelly Rosenthal and Smith that I just mentioned, what I want to point out is that there are about a 500,000 children who live within 3 miles of a polluter that's been given a 2-year free pass from the current administration to avoid complying with toxic air pollution limits. And as amazing and distressing as that is, I want to give you some details about that. And what you see on your map are all of these facilities that were allowed to send an email, as amazing as that sounds, an email saying, hey, we'd like to have a 2-year pass in terms of applying the air, applying these pollution standards. And I thought you might be interested in Maryland because in Maryland, we have these companies that you see on your screen. Let me go back one slide and just say, when you have time, if you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the source, and you can go to this site, which is being provided by the Environmental Defense Fund, who created this map with all of this information, and look in detail, not only at Maryland, but all of these places across the country to get a lot of detailed information because it's an interactive map. But going back to the 4 sites that are on the map that are in Maryland, you can see that what these companies did was they sent an email, or someone sent an email on their behalf, and they were able to get an exemption. So you might want to, and it also has their congressional districts. So you may want to look that up if you're in any of these communities and find out exactly what happened and why they are either being allowed or eligible for pollution passes. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but what I want you to know is that there are many types of problems that are related to pollution. Uh, and the people who are the most affected are children, young children, pregnant people, and people over the age of 65. So if you look on this slide, what you're going to see are a number of different examples of some of the impacts of air pollution and some of the associated health impacts. And particularly with PM 2.5 or soot pollution, which can alter the size of a child's developing brain. And that's very, very concerning. I mentioned just a while ago the American Lung Association State of the Air report. What you see on your screen are some of the general findings of that report that come out every year. Again, you can go to the website, you can look up Maryland, you can look up by your community and find out what the quality of the air is where you live. Now, in general, Maryland has moderate to okay quality of air through most of the state. Unfortunately, there are 3 Maryland counties that received an F for ozone, and that is Baltimore, the worst in the state, Harford, and Prince George's counties. Again, here's a slide that gives you the many examples of how air pollution can harm children and adults. And you see again and again asthma, which we know is worse for Black children than in any other group, also very bad for Latino children. And that is tied to where they live, typically near the most polluting facilities and near highways, and traffic is like 1/3 of the cause of greenhouse gases. Um, and just talking specifically about the home, there are common chemicals in your home that you may not even have been aware of, but you may be seeing more about it in the news media. And that is there's PFAS, or the forever chemicals, which are very dangerous and which the current administration and the EPA have been rolling back regulations to restrict these chemicals. You can find PFAS in nonstick cookware, waterproof fabrics, stain-resistant rugs. And for those of you who are eating a lot of takeout, you might want to make sure you don't heat up your food in those grease-resistant food packaging. There's also formaldehyde. No one wants to be around formaldehyde. It's terrible. There's no, safe use of formaldehyde. It unfortunately has a lot of practical uses in manufacturing, and so you will find it used. And although it needs to be severely restricted, the administration is also proposing to roll back some of the standards to protect us from formaldehyde. Vinyl chloride, similarly, phthalates and VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, are also found in the home. And Moms has a consumer facing arm. And what we have as a woman who does, we call her the mom detective, and she investigates questions from the public about, things that are dangerous in the home. And what you see on the screen are some things that you can do to reduce your exposure to these harmful toxic chemicals. Go fragrance free, avoid artificial scents and cleaners and personal care products. I've already said, get rid of the Teflon, get some stainless steel, cast iron, or glass. Avoid plastic, reduce the use of plastic as much as you can. It's ubiquitous. I know it's everywhere. I have started to do this myself, and you have to be intentional to reduce plastic in your home. And try to go for natural materials and make sure that your home is ventilated. Now, I just want to caution you that not everyone has the luxury to do some of these steps, because often they are more expensive than the less expensive and more dangerous products that are on the market. So that is another way in which Black and brown and people in low-income communities are being doubly impacted, both from first being poisoned by the chemicals and then having less resources to address the problems. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but because there are a lot of people in the audience who are in the real estate market and industry, I know that some of you have been wondering, like, she's talking about all these other chemicals. What about radon? Radon has to be detected in every purchase and sale of a home. And I'm just going to tell you very quickly the reason that radon has risen to the top, so to speak, was kind of a convergence of a lot of factors at once. And probably one of the most important factors is that although radon is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, which makes it really scary, the testing for radon is really cheap. You can get a do-it-yourself radon kit for like under 50 bucks, or you can get a professional for about $200. So when it became a national issue, because 21,000 people a year die from radon, associated with lung cancer, and it is the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. This is why radon has been able to be so successfully addressed. And I mention it also to say it shows what can be done when there's a will and a way to get a chemical addressed and do something about it. I'm not going to go through this, but I want to call to your attention that there are over 60 to 70 standards that in the last year have been rolled back that were designed to protect clean air and health. And when you have time, I want you to look at this list. There's many more, but here are some of the most serious ones. This particular list, you can refer to the article that's at the bottom of the slide that was from The Guardian. So in wrapping up, what I said at the beginning is that I have some takeaways for you about climate change and its impact on health and your home, and that you can make a difference. You have to be informed, you have to speak up, you have to take action. And on your screen, again, here's some ways that you can do it. And I just want to close by saying I didn't get to spend a lot of time to go into great detail on this, but in this entire concern that we have about climate change and clean air for children, one of the reasons that they are so severely impacted is because their bodies are still growing. They're very vulnerable to all of these chemicals and to the harms that come from them, and they are often left out of the plans, like even in state climate action plans, sometimes fail to adequately address how to mitigate the impacts on children. So, with that, I am going to open the floor for questions.
Almeta, that was great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that informative presentation. So you have a few minutes for some questions then.
Yes.
So, you know, well, I don't know where to start. I've got more questions than time here. You started talking a lot about, outdoor air quality,
Mhm.
and then you circled around to indoor air quality, which I think is great. I'm from a school of thought that says that we spend 90% of our lifetime indoors, and 75% of the outdoor air is breathed indoors.
Mhm.
And so, I guess I wanted to get your take on, high quality, low cost air quality monitors. Are you seeing that becoming a thing nowadays, where people, especially post COVID, where people are monitoring for radon and asthma triggers within their homes?
I don't have statistics on what the usage is of indoor air quality monitors, but what I would say is that there are lots of products that have come onto the market in backpacks,
Hmm.
in schools.
Hmm.
There's and um, you can use your browser or your in your state local consumer protection agency to find out some of those products. One of the things that is ironic is one of the problems related to poor indoor air quality is that in modern homes they're so tightly sealed that there's not enough ventilation, and it's trapping the poor quality air in people's homes. So, what you have to do is to be vigilant and take advantage of, you can a lot of times in your neighborhood at the state level, in Maryland, you could reach out to the State Department of Environment and find out what resources are in your community.
Hmm. Good point. Good point. So you can turn off your screen share, and we can just have a conversation. And I'll make sure that your contact information appears on the screen so that people have that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, so we're dealing with a few issues here in Maryland. This is why we created Maryland Climate Tech 2026. One is, Baltimore City has the highest rate of asthma-related fatalities in the nation, the number one spot, unfortunately. African American women 4 times more likely to die than white men. African American children 6 times more likely to die from white men because of asthma, primarily because we also have more historic architecture than Washington, D.C. and New York combined. So we've got a lot of historic architecture here. And unfortunately, homes, buildings, they just were not built for the benefit of the human occupant. Another challenge that we have is we've got the most aggressive climate law in the nation called the Maryland Climate Solutions Now Act. All of our buildings, 35,000 square feet or more, need to be net zero by 2040. The challenge that I'm seeing with this building energy performance law, and I know Washington, D.C. has one as well, Montgomery County is very aggressive with theirs, is when you read through the language, there's nothing about ventilation and air filtration. There's no language about the health and wellness of the building occupant. I think it's a misunderstanding to think that if we electrify all of our buildings, that clean indoor air comes along for the ride. And I'm here to say that that's a misunderstanding. I take these air quality monitors with me in every building that I go into, and I'm often surprised when I'm in a building that does perform well, because most do not. And so, I guess I want to hear from you as to, what can the construction and the builders and developers and the building owners, what can they do to kind of curb this situation of sick building syndrome, in
Well,
your opinion?
first let me say I'm not an expert in this area, but I am a concerned grandmother, mother, and person who cares about clean air.
Yeah.
Uh, what I encourage and what I was trying to emphasize in my presentation is that you have to be informed and take advantage of resources that you have.
Yeah.
Uh, Community groups, I mentioned the Maryland Department of Environment,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and to find out and be informed. You can reach out to the Climate Communication Center, either the one at Yale or George Mason, any of your universities, multiple fine universities in Maryland that have departments of environment and sustainable health, and to find out what they are recommending based on the facts specific to your neighborhood. That is what I would recommend. Again, I'm coming at it as a concerned
Sure.
person
Yeah.
versus being an expert, but I know that there's quite a bit of information from organizations like the Union of Concerned Scientists
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
people can get information from, and I would encourage people to look to the science
Yes.
and to find out the facts. And that's how you can determine what to do about the specific problems affecting your home.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a huge Peter Drucker fan in the sense that you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And
Right.
I think that's ultimately the answer is that there's not enough people validating that buildings are actually performing the way they should perform. I've been
Right.
into new homes that have all the environmental certifications, buildings that have the gold, platinum, silver plaques. And until you start measuring the air quality, it's just like, wow, this building really is not performing the way it should. So let's take it a few steps back. Like, how did you get to this space to be where you are talking so passionately about what drives you?
So I am in my second career.
Okay.
In my first career, I was a general counsel in healthcare organizations. And after I retired from the practice of law, I was thinking about, what could I do to use my talents and skills for the social betterment. And I'm from a family where both my parents were social workers, so I'm programmed to do good. And I looked at this issue of children and clean air, and I thought this is where I can really make a difference. And now I have, the world's most adorable grandson. So I'm even more passionate because I want my grandson to be able to grow up and be able to breathe clean air. I mean, I, as a child, would go visit my grandparents who lived on a farm in East Texas,
Mhm.
play outside all day. And at that time, it was a few years ago, but at that time, there was actually clean air.
Right.
And and you could breathe and you weren't, I mean, people think about the industry and such in Texas, but there was a time when there was really more clean air than dirty air.
Yeah.
And that's what I would like for my grandson.
Absolutely. Shouts out to Northwestern Law School as well,
Oh, thank
for preparing you for for this task.
you.
It's interesting. When you talked about PM 2.5 affecting child brain size, activity, and development, I've always thought PM 2.5 was more of a respiratory issue, but you actually educated me on the fact that it is affecting the brain as well, which I thought was very enlightening on that research.
Yeah, PM 2.5 is really insidious.
Yeah.
It's like 1/100th, I think, or 1/30th of the size of a human hair. That's how tiny it is. It can
Right.
pass right through your skin.
Yep.
And that's the reason why it's so distressing that the EPA is rolling back the standards, which were just strengthened within the last year
Right.
to reduce the amount of PM 2.5 that would be permitted. So again, we have to tell our elected officials, and maybe, we might have to currently focus on our local and state officials.
Yeah. Hmm.
This is not something that we can ignore because children are, well, not just children, we're being affected too, but children
Yeah.
who are most vulnerable are being affected.
Yeah, definitely known to be an asthma trigger as well.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about Curtis Bay, kind of Baltimore's Cancer Alley.
Hmm.
And we've had other presenters talk about kind of the duality and the comparisons between the Cancer Alley in New Orleans and the
Hmm.
Cancer Alley here in Baltimore. Shouts out to Dr. Melanie Thomas, who's doing great work in that area. And we've actually had an opportunity to do some indoor air quality monitoring of some properties there. And as soon as we get out of our car, the monitors beep 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 beep. It's the air quality down there is really really bad. And I'm glad that kind of brought that to people's attention about what's happening here in Baltimore with Curtis Bay. You also brought up redlining. And I did some brief research while you were talking about it. The property was actually 1834 McCullough Street
Oh,
here in Baltimore. It was 1910, June 1910, and the attorney's name was George McMecken, of which there's a street named after him. He moved his family onto what was at that time an all-white block, and yeah, housing discrimination definitely was invented here in Baltimore and perfected here in Baltimore and shipped out to the rest of the country. So I appreciate you bringing that up as well. So talk to me about some, as we close out, maybe give us some good news. What can we be excited about? What can we be, moving forward? What do you see as maybe some rainbows over the horizon?
well, what I see is that people are really speaking up and stepping up and taking action. We've had members of Moms Clean Air Force who've been able to stop a data center by showing up at hearings, making sure that the decision makers had the facts
Mhm.
that they knew or they inquired about. What the impact would be on the water levels, how it was going to impact rates of utilities. I happen to live in Washington, D.C., and that's quite near to Northern Virginia, which unfortunately has the largest concentration of data centers in the country. And we have started to see increases in our electric bills
Mhm. Mhm.
related to that because of the way, the grid is.
Yeah.
So what I see is that people are really becoming informed and they are showing up. And there's a number of communities in Maryland where they have been showing up to their local hearings and letting
Mhm.
their elected officials know
Mhm.
that they know what's no, this is kind of an old expression. They know what time it is. They know what's going on, and that they want informed decisions to be made, and they're not going to just blindly sit back and let an industry or a data center come into their community
Mhm.
without the proper safeguards to protect their homes and their families.
Yeah, our utility bills are here in Maryland, $6,500 annually is what our utility bills are on average, which is the highest in the nation. So we definitely feel your pain. I know ours doubled over the last 12 months, and yeah, it's definitely leading to the data center issues. So I think the words that we can take away are be informed, speak up, and take action. Right?
Right.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want our audience to know about yourself or the work that you're doing?
Well, one of the things that I just want to say is that we didn't really touch on it today, but there is a lot of research and awareness around the mental health issues related to all of this bad news that we are hearing, particularly related to the climate and to health. And I want to encourage people, if they are feeling sad or they are feeling depressed, to really just seek the help of a professional because it's real and it is very concerning. And children are also being impacted. There were floods in Western Maryland, which were very overwhelming. And in those situations, children are disrupted in their education. It's very pervasive, those issues that are related to people's well-being and mental health. So I really want people to feel comfortable to get the help they need and get the help their children need to cope with what can be very overwhelming and feel very hopeless. But I don't want people to feel hopeless. I want them to be empowered to take action so that we can protect the future for clean air.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I thank you for your time and your efforts and your leadership in what you're doing. I can't thank you enough. So, as we close out, this is Aaron Rice with Maryland Climate Tech 2026. Ms. Almeta Cooper, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day.